Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Mr. Mark Fisher, and he is sharing the 5 most common gym owner mistakes. This episode is a great episode if you want to learn from all the mistakes that we have made in running our gym over the years and the mistakes we've heard other gym owners make in our Unicorn Society group. This is a great episode for you to take lots of notes and avoid the pitfalls that we've experienced. So keep on listening. It's a great episode. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm back with Mr. Fisher. How are you today, my friend?
Doing great.
Yeah. Well, today, before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to our email list. I feel like our emails kind of crush. Fisher puts out several emails per week that are full of super valuable, tactical, actionable takeaways. We also put out content from Pete on a regular basis, who I know you all love from this podcast. We also put out a recap every weekend that tells you what you missed for the week. So even if you only want to get on our email list to get our weekly Saturday recaps, I think it's valuable. So you can go back and see high-level takeaways from all the things we talked about in a given week. So click the link in the show notes, join our email list if you're not already on it, and share with all your fitness friends who also would benefit from being on our email list, which actually is a great segue to today's topic, coincidentally, which is one of the emails Mark sent out recently. I thought was so valuable that we're going to talk about it today. And the email title was the 5 most common gym owner mistakes. And so we're just going to dive right in because I think that topic speaks for itself. And number 1 is that your prices are too high. Fisher, why are everyone's prices too high? Too low. I said high.
Too low. Yeah,
everyone's prices are too low.
Your prices are too hhigh. You're
too low.
Thousands of dollars. No one will pay.
You're
for
charging
what
too
you're
much. Why are people's prices too low, Fisher?
I mean, there's a bunch of reasons for it. Like the knee-jerk one, which is usually correct, is because most people set their prices by looking at what their competitors are charging down the street, and they charge a little bit less. And a lot of people, what they charge is tightly wound up in a lot of their sense of self-worth and money. And a lot of people, for very understandable reasons, get very afraid thinking through about what these sales conversations will look like and people being angry at them because they're charging too much money. And I think that all makes a lot of sense. But in practice, a lot of people, nonetheless, are charging such a little rate for their monthly membership that the business just doesn't work. And there's probably room for debate around what is too low. At Business for Unicorns, we have some models that we use because to some extent you can map the price per month to how many people you can fit in per session, right? So to state the obvious example, if you can fit in, 30 people per class, which I don't know, that's a great idea, but if you can, you have a lot more capacity in theory and can play more volume game and have a slightly lower monthly rate. Whereas if you're only doing, for instance, one-on-one, for your business to work, you're going to have to charge a lot more. So although I think there probably is some room for debate around what those numbers are, and we certainly have ours, I think that regardless, in our experience, it is very rare that the people we see are in line with the numbers we would recommend. And I think even giving a charitable room for differences of opinion, I think most gym owners, by any stretch of the imagination, even by people that don't have the numbers we would offer as benchmarks, would say that most gym owners are massively underpriced. And that is a lot of downstream issues, right? To say nothing of like your ability to pay yourself appropriately, your ability to have a team that's paid appropriately, your ability to have some freedom so that you're not chained to the business. A lot of issues downstream if you're not charging enough for your base services.
Yeah, 100%. And the benchmarks that we use that I think you listed in the email are, on average, we see for like small group personal training around $300 per month per client as like a membership fee on average. And for classes around $175 per month for like a larger group class. Again, it's an average, it's a benchmark. But I think if you're nowhere near those for those services, you might want to do some looking. And we also have a free tool on our website called our Raise Your Rates playbook. So if you just go to Business Unicorn or click, I'll put it in the show notes. So in the show notes, we'll put a link to the Raise the Rates playbook. And that's a roadmap to just raising your rates, which you should be doing every year anyway.
And if I can offer one other quick thing about those.
Go ahead.
Just one other quick thing about those benchmarks. When we say $300 for small group personal training, understand we're basing that on 6-on-1. And when we say 175 people for group classes, we're basing on that 20 people per class or more. So I also want to highlight that because
Yep.
sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm doing amazing. I'm charging. I mean, I'm a little under. It's 165, but like that's pretty good.
Yes.
But then you look at their business and they're like, well, you're only doing 9 people can fit in your class. That's actually closer to small
Yes.
group members, right? Or small group,
Yes.
if you're doing 3-on-1, which by the way can be a good way to go, right? There's actually strong argument to be made, frankly, for a 4-on-1 that charges even more money. It's a little bit less of a volume play. You need less clients. You will
Yeah.
have to charge more per month. So retention is going to be a little bit more of a grind. But you could argue you can get closer to true 1-on-1 with 4-on-1 than 6-on-1. So it's not our preferred model. I
Yeah.
think we prefer 6-on-1 generally. But I just want to highlight that because, again, if you're like, oh, I'm doing 3-on-1 and I'm doing 270 per month, that's not quite there, but it's almost there. Well, now we have trouble here in River City because when you do the math of it, again, it's going to be
Yeah.
very hard for you to have sufficient margin to run your business.
Yeah, 100%. That's why benchmarks are so challenging right there, because it leaves out the context, which is different for all of us. But I think just making sure that you have
Gotta
a
have something.
model where the math works,
Yep.
yeah, is
Yep.
really important, really critical. So that's number one, which is your rates are too low. Number two, big mistake that we see a lot is that you expand too soon. So walk us through what
Yep.
is the right pace of expansion look like?
Yes. So, it's interesting because again, this is a big bucket. If I were being less a clickbaity person and trying to put everything in buckets, I probably would delineate these different kinds of expansion because they're actually all different, but I think they
Mm-hmm.
all stem from the same incorrect thinking that we map out. We're like, okay, I'm really not quite ready to expand X thing, but like I'm pretty sure in 6 months we'll be there. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it and be prepared for the business that I know is certain to come once I make this change for this demand I know is coming. And examples of this might be adding in sessions before you really need to, right? So if your utilization is
Mm-hmm.
too low and you don't have enough people in the sessions as is, but Billy says he wants to train on Mondays at 2 p.m. and you're like, well, okay, I will get this other client who will be X per month. So, if I do the math of it, it just makes sense to offer it. And by the way, we prepare for all this other business that's going to come in when I open up these class times. And usually that's not going to be the
Yeah.
case. Some other examples of this are adding services without sufficient demand, right? A classic thing here is, people being like, my clients need nutrition. And by the way, forgive me, Father, I have sinned here too. So we add in this nutrition program,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately, there aren't enough people willing to pay what you need to charge to make it sense. And now you run into issues. And of course, the classic ones deal with space. So the most notorious one, of course, is thinking that if my first location is not doing good, if I add a second one, to which I always say the metaphor, this is very much akin to I'm having trouble in my marriage. I think if we open up the
Yeah.
relationship and I have a girlfriend, that will make it much easier to navigate these issues with my wife. And based on the experience of many people I know, it doesn't actually seem to work like that, actually, in spite of what you might think. So anyway, those are some examples.
Shockingly, that gets a little complicated.
Can
Yeah.
get complicated.
Um,
I'm not saying it never works,
yeah. Well,
but
listen, yeah, I think those are really great examples for sure. And I think all too often we talk to gym owners who have that kind of, if I build it, they will come mentality.
yep,
And oftentimes we're trying to convince them, like, no, you should sell it and then start building it. Right? Like,
yeah,
that you have to create the demand. The demand doesn't come from capacity. And
yep,
so I think you need to, capacity can trail demand. That's okay. And people are just so fearful of like having clients and not enough time. It's like, well, adding times is much easier than getting clients.
yeah,
So focus on that part first.
yep,
Yeah. That's a great one. All right. Number three is all about staff compensation. And
yeah.
quite often your staff compensation is just wrong. It's just the ratios are wrong
Yep.
for being profitable. So walk us through this one.
Yeah, so a lot of people just pay their staff too much because most of us make the mistake. We're like, well, my boss wasn't paying me enough. I'm gonna do better with my team. And then we decide, oh,
Yeah.
I'll pay out 80 cents on the dollar because you're doing most of the work, not factoring the fact that a fully loaded payroll, depending on your state, is going to be easily another 10 to 15% on top of that, right? So let's say like, okay, well that's $92, and then 3% for credit card fees. Oh, that's like $95. And then if you're doing any kind of benefits, which I realize is not common, but let's shoot for the moon here, you literally might be in the hole at that rate. And in practice, you might think, okay, but I do like 55%. That's better. But even so, when you back out the math, play the same game again. Let's say it's $5 for the payroll taxes and then another 3%. That still means you're only keeping 37 out of those $100. it's going to be very hard to have
Yeah.
enough money left over to pay rent, to pay for marketing, to pay for, if you want some bookkeeping help, et cetera, et cetera. So the numbers we always say is we think like 40% is a good max. Getting down to 35% is better. 30 or even 25% if you could do it is amazing. And I will say briefly, is it possible to pay your staff too little? Yes. Again, in practice, we almost never
Of
see it happen.
course.
Sort of like
Yeah.
charging. Can you charge too much? Yep, you can charge too much in some markets where the product is not good enough and the market is not there and you can't retain or sell
Yeah.
because just nobody's going to pay those rates. I hesitate to say that out loud because everyone's listening like, oh, it's me. It's almost none of you. It's almost
It's
never
not.
happens. Uh, but I do think it's maybe a little bit more plausible for people to try to really nickel and dime their staff and then be like, why can't I keep anybody? I can't keep anybody around here. It's like, this is a great job for $17 an hour for 3 hours per week at first thing in the morning with no sort of benefits. That can present some issues too. So I
Yeah.
think that the former is the bigger issue, but you have to get it right,
Yeah.
which sometimes means paying more actually.
Yeah. I think that the thing that so many folks do is that they start off their compensation strategy only looking at what they've made themselves
Yep.
nearby
Yep.
or what
Yep.
other trainers have get paid nearby.
Yep.
Similarly, as we were talking about rates. And it's like they based it just on what other trainers have made and not on their own business model, not on
Yes.
their own revenue and expenses. So I think thinking through those ratios and finding benchmarks by working with us or, finding those benchmarks online really helps you set the right ratios because you really can't revenue your way out of paying your staff too much. Right? There's a
Yeah.
certain
It's
level
very hard to do.
of the certain ratio that's just impossible to
Yeah.
overcome with
Yep.
more
Yep.
revenue, and so you have to get that percentage right. And so I think it's a really important one.
Yeah, because the
Let's
game
keep
is
going.
controlling gross.
Oh,
The
go
game
ahead.
is controlling gross. I was gonna say the game is controlling gross,
Yeah.
right? So if too much money is coming off the top of each dollar coming in, it just does. You have
Yes.
to do so much volume. You're never really going to get there. I think the final thing I'll say briefly, as far as how the challenge you can run into sometimes, I get this in a lot of markets, is the trainer you're looking to hire. They're going to be like, yeah, but if I go train down the street, independent trainer, I'm making $70 an hour, and it's like that's true, but you're also paying, $15 of that hour you're paying out to the owner of that gym, right? Then you
Hmm.
are presumably probably, if you're not doing credit card fees, maybe they can save that money. But in practice, now you're an independent contractor, which means not only you're responsible for your own taxes, you're going to get that sweet self-employment penalty that nobody ever thinks about because now they will have to actually pick up what a business otherwise would have contributed to some of the various taxes that a business contributes to.
Yeah.
So at any rate, I know that that's going to be an annoying thing
Not
when
to
you run
mention,
into, and
they have to do their own marketing, their own
they have to do
sales,
their own
maintain their
marketing.
own
Yeah, I mean,
website. Right.
it's
But
not a
yeah,
fair
it's like the list
comparison.
goes on.
Yeah, and they're
Yeah.
going to listen. People are incentivized to get you to compare it to what they want to, but life is full of
Yeah.
unfair things. That's dark to
Yeah.
say, but it's true.
Listen, I mean, I think we're both big advocates for we want well-paid people who feel like they're
Yeah, to
compensated
take care
well
of
for their
people. Yeah,
job. We want them to stick around. I want there to be more kind of career opportunities for trainers in this
yeah,
industry where there
yeah.
historically have been very few. And as an owner, you can't shoot yourself in the foot by
No.
overpaying from day one and then be confused about why you can never pay yourself. Right? You have to be thoughtful about these percentages. So
Yep.
anything over 40% should be at least a little yellow flag that raises an eyebrow for
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Unless you're not in the business. If you're truly not in
Um,
the business, then there's a case you made.
True, that different ball game. All right, so we're on number 4 out of 5. Number 4 big mistake gym owners make is you spend money on the wrong things. This could be its own podcast. But
Yeah.
high level, what are some of the things that we see gym owners spend money on that just should not be a priority?
Yeah, I mean, the most cliche one is fancy equipment. That's very cliche
Yep.
for a gym owner just loves the equipment. They're enamored with the equipment. They really think oh, if I get this amazing, sexy thing, then the people are just gonna be lining up out the doors because they can't wait to get on X piece of really amazing equipment. And in practice, that is
Mm-hmm.
almost never true. So I think there's a lot of other things that maybe would fall under that, but I think that's the one that jumps to mind as the most common way that gym owners make this mistake.
Yeah, I think it's a big one. And instead, that of that money, they should be spending that money on marketing, spending that money
Yeah.
on leveling up their skills, spending on that money on finding real strategies for growing the business. But I think it's a good example. We'll keep going. We can keep talking about that one for a long time. Number five, of 5 out of 5 of mistakes gym owners make is that gym owners ignore their most important asset, which is what?
Oh, it's your existing contact database. I talk about this so much, and I'm going to spend my entire career just talking about it because the whole game, is for people. They have to first know you, then they have to like and trust you. And then in response to some kind of interesting offer, if they not hire you, they at least make a step towards hiring you, right? Well, the very top of what is often uh, used often in the metaphor of a funnel, right, where it's wider at the top and narrow at the bottom. The top of the funnel is the people that know you exist, because it is very difficult in my experience to sell somebody to somebody that doesn't know that you're there, right? Because if you're going to try to
Yeah.
sell them, they know you're there, right? And for a lot of individuals, they are thinking about driving leads or thinking about how do they get new people to find out they exist. And that's good. You need to do that. I'm not taking anything away from the value of audience building. But for a lot of people, they just haven't properly organized their existing list of personal contacts, or most with love, unforgivable, are people that you have an
Hmm.
explicit professional relationship with. This could be people that, were prospects at one point that never came in. They could be people that were clients back in the day that left on very friendly terms that haven't been in a while. So there are all sorts of people that probably know you and probably already like and trust you, but you just haven't
Yep.
organized your database such that they're hearing from you on a regular basis. And that is perhaps the biggest missed opportunity, I think, in all of Jim Dumb marketing.
Yeah, I think it's such an important one. You know, fun, fun personal share is when we have a new Unicorn Society member who joins Unicorn Society, and within the first few weeks of them joining, I get sent their newsletter from their gym. I get so excited and send them like a congratulations email or text
Yeah,
because they're
yeah.
doing exactly what we're talking about, which is
Which
like,
almost
I'm
never
not
happens, by
probably
the way.
buying anything from them. Like, it almost never happens.
Yeah.
It's literally just a 1% of Unicorn Study members who have that process where anyone they meet, anyone who goes into their inbox just gets added to the list. And, while again, I'm not probably ever going to buy anything from their gym, I probably don't even live anywhere near them. Right? The fact that they have that routine in place, I just always want to applaud and celebrate,
Awesome. Yeah.
because you're only growing your business to as big as the number of people who know you
Oh, yeah.
exist, right? And so
So
it really
Tim
warms my heart
Kincannon,
when I get
shout out
those
Tim
emails.
Kincannon if you're listening. Yeah, he always sends me his emails. I'm like, that's my guy. That's my
Yeah,
guy.
totally. I
Yeah,
mean,
because
sometimes
because
I'll
also
I'll
people.
unsubscribe in a few weeks, but I also want to celebrate
Yeah.
that they added me in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah,
and that's the thing too. Like, people will unsubscribe, like, and understand, like, we don't, unfortunately, there's like a lot of context we can go into this that we have in our marketing playbook that we take the Unicorn side of people through. Cause like, you have to be careful. You don't want to like spam people. I think there's ways of doing it
of
that
course.
are more professional and lead to better open rates and better relationships with these people. So I'm not literally suggesting just go ahead and just like spam all the people. But in practice, if they already
Of
know
course.
you and they already kind of like you, they're probably not offended by this, right?
Yeah.
Like in New York City, for instance,
No.
I have a lot of friends who are former actors, and a lot of former actors or current actors become real estate brokers. And the very first thing you do when you become a real estate broker, if you're at any major agency, they make you just dump all of your contacts and you start sending out a
Hmm.
monthly newsletter of some kind. And it's harder for real estate brokers. At least in fitness, we're talking about things that are really relevant for everybody. Now, admittedly, I happen to like real estate, so I don't totally hate that. But the real estate brokers are either just randomly sending you apartments from a given zip code. And that, I think, kind of makes sense, because that's, if you happen to be in the market for buying, you have to be there, particularly with real estate, right? It's like you're not going to convince somebody to buy an apartment. You kind of just have to be there when they're looking. But what a lot of them do,
Yeah.
and I don't know this really makes sense for a lot of gym owners, is they'll just send like the slice of life. Here's the things that are going on in New York, right? And I get it. They're
Yeah.
trying to build, and some of them successfully, a personal brand and a relationship, so that just like as the gym owner, if and when it's time, because people don't buy when we're ready, they buy when they're ready. So we want to just be there with top of mind awareness. So if and when it's time, they think of us because we've been visiting them on a regular basis with some sort of ongoing marketing.
Yeah. I think it's a great note to leave it on. Honestly, I think it's yeah, great sentiment. Got to stay top of mind. All right, my friends. Well, hopefully you found it valuable to hear these 5 mistakes gym owners make and some things you can do to avoid those mistakes. And if you want more hot tips like that, click the link in the show notes and join our email list to get stuff like that on a regular basis. Thanks for a great conversation as always, Mr. Fisher. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.
Bye.